I am Bryce Newberger, and this is the Kinship Chronicles, Children of the Phoenix, Chapter 10. Cal sat among the trees in the forest surrounding Ridgewood. He let his makeshift pole dangle in the small pond, waiting for a bite. He didn't think about how impossible his odds were due to not having any bait on the line. His stomach grumbled, and he had dreamed of catching fish and roasting it, though he actually had no idea where to begin with that. Another muffled gurgle from his belly protested his lack of food. He figured enough was enough, and he headed to the town. The daily learnings would have let out by then, so he figured it was okay if he was seen milling about. Cal didn't want to return home yet. He just knew his father would be back waiting for him, probably smoking his pipe and waiting for dinner as he usually did when he was home early. Cal remembered hearing about Winston in the morning and his involvement with his father's seizure. He decided he would play a nasty trick on his way home. He arrived at the merchant's shop from the rear alley and started to think of some malevolent ideas. I'll put tacks in his bed, or maybe a snake. He imagined the portly merchant jumping and screaming, and then he heard some voices approaching from the side alley. Come on, we can climb through the back window. I don't know, Ox. I don't feel right about stealing. Cal blanched. It was Ox and his cronies. He ran to the opposite alley, but there stood Winston, talking with Mayor Gowan. He doubled back and saw a stack of crates near the roof. Perfect, he thought. With a wild scramble and frantic energy, he was soon walking on unsteady shingles. His 8-year-old mind didn't fully appreciate the dangerous fact that one slip and he would break every bone in his little body. He slid to the edge of the roof, enjoying the feel of his shoe sliding across the smooth shingles like stone ice. I don't like it, said Mayor Gowan. They paid me, and I get a good wife out of the whole ordeal, said Winston through a stuffy voice. It sounded to Cal like the large man couldn't breathe through his nose. I regret this whole thing, said the mayor exasperatedly. Why did you start this little escapade in the first place? The town will just have to trust me, he said in a grievous tone. There was a loud crash in the back of the store, and Winston rushed to the clatter while Gowan briskly stepped out of the alley and back into the muddle of the general population. Cal looked in the back to see Ox's feet kicking out of the merchant's window, obviously stuck like a cork in a bottle. Cal laughed at the sight, but began to wonder how he would get down. Amora and Teddy finished straightening the house within a few moments to spare before they expected their mother to return home with their father in tow. Let's be sitting at the table reading like good children for when they get home, said Amora. Teddy nodded in agreement, and both of them grabbed their favorite books as they waited. While Teddy looked at his richly illustrated pages, Amora just stared at the woods in front of her, replaying the morning's events and possibilities of the evening's scenarios over and over. Time passed slowly, and Teddy grew restless as he flipped through the same pages over and over. He finally let out a small whine, but Amora ignored him. Teddy gave up and moved to the corner to play with his toys. Still staring, lost in her world of possibilities, Amora waited and waited for her mother and father to come home. But they didn't. Like a mood ring with raging emotions, the sky began to paint itself with colors of purple, then red, then orange. Finally, it settled into a depressing twilight blue-gray. He had never closed the shop on his own, and it took Eldrich longer than he had hoped to lock up. He hadn't been able to sharpen the master-crafted rapier, but he decided to take it home with him in hopes he could show it to his father. But he won't be there, Eldrich thought darkly. He decided to make good on his earlier revelation. It was time to pay Merchant Winston a visit. He altered his path and headed towards the merchant's shop. It didn't take long for him to hear a commotion coming from the destination, followed, somewhat quickly, by Ox running from Winston. Stop him! Yelled Winston. Eldrich pondered the correct course of action. Should he let the childhood nemesis get away, or stop him and let the suspicious Mr. Winston catch Ox? There was precious little love lost for Ox in whatever situation he had gotten himself into. Eldrich stuck his foot out and let the pudgy bully topple over. Winston caught up to the boys, but left his breath somewhere behind him. Ah, he managed to finally say. Well done, son. Though Eldrich caught more to the word son than when it usually substituted for lad or boy. It also seemed as if Winston was fixing him with a peculiar gaze. No problem, he replied with a bit of hesitancy. Let me go, cried Ox as Winston held the boy down. I didn't take nothing, honest, he protested. Shut up, you fat little gremlin, shouted Winston with a violence that scared both children into silence. What did you steal from me? Nothing, nothing, liar! Winston slapped Ox hard enough to cause his nose to bleed. Liar! He struck him again. Ox's face went blank and tears mounted around the corners of his eyes. His lips began to tremble and hint to the hysteria children display when in traumatizing situations. Eldrich watched as a petrified observer, too shocked to put words to the sickness dwelling in his gut. He had often thought he hated Ox. Now that Ox was on the receiving end of torment, Eldrich knew he didn't like to see anyone treated this way, even the bully, Ox. Winston grabbed the thickly thief by the arm and started to drag him away toward the back alleys of the shops. Eldrich mentally noticed that the guardhouse was in the opposite direction. Despite his nerves, he spoke, "Aren't you going to take him to the guards?" Winston just let out a muttering of foul language that Eldrich didn't understand as he dragged the boy into the recesses of the abandoned alleyways. A few onlookers shifted their gaze uneasily and walked away. The merchant held too much power for the bystanders to risk involving themselves. Eldrich, then faced with two choices: walk away and go home, leaving Ox to whatever fate his devious actions had created for himself, or investigate and try to save one deviant from, perhaps, another more nefarious evil. Winston had fumbled with Ox for a while before getting him pulled out of the window, and Cal had to wait for them to scurry off before he could get off the roof. He was about to scamper home when he wondered which bulbous aggressor would outrun the other. As he turned to look, he saw Winston strike Ox twice. He felt a smile touch his face. Finally, that bully was getting a taste of his own medicine. He decided this was too good to miss, and he climbed back into hiding, working his way into the window the children had forced open previously. He was so focused on what torture Winston could inflict on Ox that he didn't notice the shadow right behind him. Amora's head had slumped into her book as the effects of slumber began to drift over her. She was halfway between dreaming and groggy awareness when she heard the door open. She slowly looked up to see her mother walk through the door. Thank you for listening. I'm Bryce Newberger, and this has been the Kinship Chronicles, Children of the Phoenix. If you enjoyed what you heard and you'd like to purchase the full book, then either look up New Books on the Google Play bookstore, NEU Books, or simply click the link in the description. The book is only $5, and I appreciate your support.